Coming up on Tech News today, how many iPhone 5Cs did Apple sell? Can we tell? I don't know. Ardio might go free by the end of the year, and Box takes on not only Microsoft Office, but Google Docs, and who knows, maybe Evernote as well. All that more coming up.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Monday, September 16th, 2013. Tech News Today is brought to you by Shutterstock.com. With over 28 million high-quality stock photos, illustrations, vectors, and video clips, Shutterstock helps you take your creative projects to the next level. For 25% off your new account, go to Shutterstock.com and use offer code TNT9. And by TechServe. TechServe assists U.S. businesses of all sizes with their technology needs, including Apple, Avid, Adobe, and HP solutions. Visit techserve.com/TNT and receive a complimentary iPad deployment assessment. And by RingCentral. We do everything in the cloud. That's why we love our cloud-based phone system by RingCentral. Zero startup costs, and RingCentral is $20 a month per user. Try it now with a 30-day risk-free trial. Buy one desk phone, get a second phone free, up to 20 phones. Call 800-543-9980 or visit ringcentral.com and use our promo code TWIT. Welcome to Tech News Today. I'm Tom Merritt.
I'm Sarah Lane.
And I'm Jason Howell.
And Ayaz Akhtar has one more day off. He'll be back with us tomorrow. But joining us today are the top 10 stories of the day. We've decided to call them the News Fuse. Grand Theft Auto 5 is one of the most anticipated video games releases of the year. It's set to arrive tomorrow, unless you're one of the lucky people who already got it by pre-ordering from Amazon.co.uk, who happened to mail out some of those early, like as early as Saturday in some cases. Several people have posted about getting the game early, and a few have posted spoilers to the internet. The rest of us will just have to wait.
Sprint's preparing to launch Sprint One Up on September 20th. It's a program that allows its customers to pay for their smartphones or tablets in monthly installments and then upgrade after every year by trading in their devices. Sprint's the last of the U.S. carriers to offer a program like this. T-Mobile got the ball rolling back in July with its Jump program. Then AT&T launched Next. Verizon introduced Edge. Sprint's early upgrade program, called Upgrade Now, which requires an upgrade fee, will still exist for those customers not eligible for One Up.
Korea's Digital Times, not to be confused with Digitimes, different place, reports its sources say Samsung is already hard at work on a successor to the yet-to-be-released Galaxy Gear watch. Not much of a surprise that they're working on something, but they had some specs, too. The next Galaxy Gear would include GPS, improved battery life, and a support for a greater array of Android devices. What may surprise some is that Samsung is considering launching the next watch as early as CES in January or Mobile World Congress in February. That first Galaxy Gear is yet to be released in October.
Apple and its carrier partners began accepting pre-orders last Friday for the iPhone 5C, but after its first weekend, unlike years past, Apple hasn't published a press release after the first weekend of pre-orders. Always did that before, with details on exactly how many people signed up for the new iPhone. Now, according to Apple's website, all 5 versions of the iPhone 5C are still available, though shipping times have slipped for certain colors past the original September 20th delivery day. Bloomberg reports that over in China Unicom, China's second largest carrier behind China Mobile, received more than 100,000 orders for the 5C.
I just can't help reading it China Unicorn.
Every time I have to make myself not say unicorn. It's hard.
It's hard. Ardio is partnering up with the U.S.'s second largest owner of FM radio stations, Cumulus Media. In the deal, Cumulus gets a stake in Ardio's parent company, Pulsar Media, and then will sell ads for Ardio for a forthcoming free version of the Ardio service, as well as providing programming in the form of playlists and possibly some news and talk content.
The latest update to the Explorer edition of Google Glass headgear no longer requires a tethering plan for smartphone data sharing. With the XE9 app loaded onto headsets, Google Glass can bypass both the smartphone's Bluetooth tethering settings and extra plan previously needed from some carriers. To match the change, the application's notification icon sports two little arrows to signify that info is flowing in. Inflow. Made that up. No word yet on if this change will make it to units that will eventually be available to the public.
I'm going to use that now. Here's some more inflow on how Netflix chooses its programming. As Netflix is rolling out its service in the Netherlands, it revealed to Dutch site Tweaker how it picks the programs it acquires. And according to Netflix VP of Content Acquisition Kelly Merriman, company looks at torrents. Merriman said the show Prison Break is exceptionally popular on local piracy sites, so Netflix snapped up the rights to Prison Break for the Netherlands version of Netflix.
Oh, isn't that nice? Cloud storage platform Box is offering a new feature for customers to create content within its service and calling it Box Notes. It will rival services like Google Docs and even Evernote and has a planned general release in 2014. Some of Box Notes' features include real-time collaborative editing with your other team members, note heads, which tell you when somebody's working on a particular document, inline annotating, and commenting.
Sailfish, the mobile OS made by the Nokia refugees at Yola, now has Android compatibility. Yola says it has Android apps like Instagram, WeChat, and Spotify running on Sailfish already. Sailfish is the descendant of Amigo. That was the former joint project of Intel and Nokia. A second round of pre-orders for the first Sailfish device will open up to Fins first later this week.
A new Linux kernel development report shows Samsung and Google as the 7th and 8th most frequent corporate contributors to the open source kernel that powers operating systems from mobile devices to desktops and servers. They rank behind Red Hat, Intel, Texas Instruments, Linaro, SUSE, S-U-S-E, and IBM. SUSE. The report covers almost 92,000 changes to Linux from 3,738 individuals since version 3.3 in March 2012.
We've got a round table rolling in. We're going to bring Nate Langston in to talk about stuff in a second. But first, let me thank our first sponsor for today's show, Shutterstock.com. They have 28 million high-quality stock photos, illustrations, vectors. If you're doing any kind of creative project, you're making flyers, you're making posters, you're making brochures, you're making videos, you'll find the perfect image or video for your next creative project, whether it's for your website or a piece of print. You can choose from over 28 million high-quality stock photos, illustrations, vectors, and video clips. They source their images from professionals from all around the world. They add 10,000 images a day, but they also look at those images and make sure that they're high quality. You get flexible pricing. You can choose whatever pack you need. If you need 25 images a day, they got a pack for you. Just need a couple, they got you covered there. And they give you the images you need to use legally. You don't have to worry that you're going to get sued by somebody because you are paying. You're not paying a crazy amount, but you are paying to get into that marketplace. I found a good image for It's a Thing. We were doing invasive species and I needed a lionfish. And they had tons of lionfish pictures. I had my choice of like pages and pages of lionfish. You can try Shutterstock today by signing up for a free account. You don't need a credit card. Just start an account and begin using Shutterstock to help imagine what your next project could be like and save your favorite images to a lightbox to review later. Once you decide to purchase, use offer code TNT9 and new accounts will receive 25% off any package. That's Shutterstock.com for 25% off new accounts. Use that offer code TNT9. We thank Shutterstock for their support of Tech News Today. All right, let's welcome in Nate Langston to gather around and discuss the stories of the day. Editor at wired.co.uk. Good to have you back, man.
Oh, it's so good to be back. And look how much more highly defined I am this time. Now I'm doing this from home and not from my office where the Wi-Fi is terrible.
You didn't have to point it out. But you do it great today. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Let's start off talking about the iPhone 5C pre-order story we heard in the news feeds.
Yeah, so the reason that this is interesting is Apple has historically since 2009 when the 3GS was launched has always the Monday after the opening weekend of orders being taken, whether it's pre-orders or just the phone being available to sell, published numbers. And the numbers were always better than the phone before. Apple is not saying this time around how many devices that it pre-sold in the first 24 hours. Now, Apple historically has doubled the number of pre-orders it's received each consecutive year, But then again, there has always been just that one single new iPhone model. This is a different year. The 5C is the only device up for pre-sale. Obviously, Apple is planning to begin sales of the 5S model this Friday at 12:01 a.m. Pacific time, as well as through carrier partners. We see some indications that certain models of the 5C, if you go, I went to apple.com this morning and just click around within the store, certain unlocked SIM-free 5Cs are shipping on the 25th, which is a slip from the 20th. So it seems like there are certain models that have sold well. But again, we don't have specific numbers. Now, you might remember last year when the iPad 4 and the iPad mini were both launched, Apple ended up bundling those numbers together, and they looked like really healthy numbers, but they didn't break out which numbers were mini and which ones were for the full-size new iPad. Nate, what do you think? Is this just Apple's tactic? Are we going to see something probably next Monday that puts all the numbers together, or could this be signaling that the 5C didn't sell so well?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think you hit an entire box of nails on all of their heads, actually. With the iPad and iPad mini comparison, I think that is exactly what's going on here. I mean, at first I wondered if it's because they weren't doing pre-orders in as many countries as before, but they are. They're doing about 9 or 10, I think. And I think that really Apple is probably just waiting for first 24-hour sales. And there may also be a factor that the iPhone 5S not being available for pre-order means that some people have been hesitant perhaps in ordering the 5C until they know how much more the 5S is going to be, and perhaps Apple wonders if that has like significantly affected sales numbers in the lead up to launch. But I think that you're right. I think that within 24 hours or a couple of days after the iPhone goes on sale, we're going to see first weekend sales press release, and then we'll see that written up across all the world's websites.
Yeah, I can't disagree with either one of you. Either Saturday, because they have these iPhone 5C numbers ready to roll in, they'll come out with in the first 24 hours, we've sold blah-de-blah of the new iPhones, and they won't break it out between 5C and 5S. Or they'll wait till Monday. If that number isn't quite impressive enough, they might wait till Monday and say, over the weekend, we set a record for iPhone sales after a new release, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But remember, the iPhone 5S is the one that's going to sell better. So Apple doesn't want to come out with a number now that's going to be a lesser number, especially when the press is already all over the 5C. I think normal people, as they put it, I think Wade Bush may have been. I mean, I can't remember if it was Wade Bush or Gene Munster who said normal people are actually very excited about the 5C. It's the tech press who aren't. But those numbers are going to be bigger with the 5S. That's the upshot of it.
I'm also really curious to see how well the 4S sells, because seriously, that is now a very, very good value phone for its performance. I mean, yes, you can still get cheaper, but I wonder if people are going to dash out and think, well, that's now the budget phone, and it's still a great phone, and run out and buy a bunch of those. I think that could be, we'll never see those numbers probably, but it could be very interesting if we do. Yeah,
they'll just be rolled in, but you're right. I wonder how many, because of that criticism of, well, there doesn't seem to be much difference. Every time gets greater and greater. There's less difference between the 4S and the 5S in that respect. 4S has Siri. 4S just doesn't have the bigger screen. So, and if you can get it for free, that's a good point.
Yeah, 4S was the first iPhone that really stepped up the camera as well. I mean, the camera it was slightly improved for the 5, but for the most part, if you have a 4S, you've got a really good iPhone camera. It's weird to see the numbers getting diluted. I mean, and that's inevitable if you've got different products and different lines and different tiers. It's just something that Apple really has never done with the iPhone before, but it started to do it with the iPad last year. And I think that it just puts less emphasis on the first 24 hours of anything because there are just more products.
Let's talk about Ardio offering free streaming. That seems to be grabbing the headlines from everybody. They're partnering with Cumulus Media, as we mentioned. They do KFOG in San Francisco, KABC here in LA. Lots of stations, 525 stations across the United States. And the deal here is Cumulus is going to sell ads for this supposed free service that Ardio would come out with by the end of the year. They would also provide playlists, so there could be different versions of Ardio pre-programmed stations based on the Cumulus formats. It's about $100 million worth of help that Cumulus is going to give, and they get a stake in Pulsar Media, which owns Ardio. Could see some news and talk in there. It's very similar to the deal that iHeartRadio has with Clear Channel. In fact, a lot of Cumulus Media radio stations provide their feeds to iHeartRadio, and that doesn't seem like it's going to end anytime soon. We'll see if they stick with that. But it does seem to be the future of radio and the future of streaming. They both have their issues. Streaming has a problem affording all of the music and finding a large enough user base. They need some marketing help. And radio, terrestrial radio, has a problem in that they aren't seen as hip. They aren't seen as on the cutting edge. And this helps lend them some credibility with people like, hey, I'm going to listen to that radio station because they're partnered up with Ardio. It gives radio a future, a place to have an outlet, because Ardio listeners or Spotify listeners could listen to the radio stations that they provide. Because remember, it's not about the local radio stations a lot of times with these big companies. It's about the formats that they create. So Nate, what do you think? Is this the future of streaming?
It's a future. It's a future of streaming. I mean, I don't envy anyone in the streaming music market right now, because it's so fiercely competitive, and so many of the services have the potential to be very, very similar in feel. And I do wonder, when I first read about this, whether this is a move by Ardio to secure even sort of a greater impression of legitimacy, perhaps, against some of the competition by teaming up with, a company like Cumulus. And I think that it also helps them separate themselves from the competition as well. I mean, if they're starting perhaps doing spoken word on this as well as music, it does change the game slightly. And from what I've seen with the likes of Spotify and the Napsters and things like that, anything that helps differentiate yourself as a streaming provider is probably a good thing.
There may be some desperation, with this partnership, but as a Ardio subscriber and daily user, I think this is great because Ardio is all about music, and then there are other apps where I can subscribe to a variety of radio stations, some local stations, some just whatever. But it would be nice to have them all in one place. Ardio at this point is just not the kind of place where I can listen to anything that's some sort of a news program or some sort of talk thing or anything that's just based in traditional terrestrial radio. So it gives me more options and one more reason not to have to be piggybacking my apps and flipping back and forth between the two.
I've started to use Ardio. We have a family subscription, me and my wife, and I've started to use it more since they started a customized station.
Oh yeah, I love that. I love that. I was listening to it all Saturday morning. And you can adjust, do you want it to be conservative or risky and what it picks. Mm-hmm. I don't know that this partnership with Cumulus really changes that part of it that much, but if at the very least it lets Ardio get some more marketing and more users and able to survive, I'll be happy, because I do like more and more that ability to choose between okay, here's the playlist that I have carefully managed, and longtime listeners have heard me explain how I have this playlist I've been managing for over a decade. And then every once in a while I'm like, I don't want to hear that. I just want to hear something totally different, totally random, but that is still stuff that I like. And that's where those pre-programmed formats come in.
I'm still very curious to know how Ardio is going to expand, because I only found out today when I was researching that Ardio exists in the UK. They're in 30 countries, but I do not know a single person who uses Ardio. I mean, over here, Spotify is everything. It is the only thing people use really for streaming music. And, I'm very curious to know sort of if they're planning on doing this with international stations, companies like Cumulus, because frankly, they could probably do with a shot in the arm over here, anecdotally, from what I've seen.
I mean, the vast majority of people who use streaming services use Spotify in the U.S. as well. I mean, Ardio is based in San Francisco, so there's probably more people, that are geographically close to me that are using Ardio. But Spotify is definitely the much larger of the two companies, even though they're often compared to each other.
Let's move on to a different way of making some money off your users, and that's data. Everybody wants to make money on big data. Now Marissa Meyer's going to make some off Tumblr, huh?
Yeah, Tumblr, which is now a Yahoo property, has a new deal with a company called Data Sift, and the deal is that it provides a fire hose of Tumblr data, which is real-time data, stuff that's coming in, and then historic data, everything that we've all posted to Tumblr over the years to power consumer engagement analytics and provide ad partners when they say, do we want to buy ads on Tumblr? And Tumblr can say, look at all this rich data, so you know a lot about your potential customers. Data Sift is actually a partner with Twitter. In Twitter's own advertising ambitions, obviously Twitter announced its IPO last week. Advertising ambitions are at the forefront of what Twitter is taking seriously. The deal means that Data Sift basically becomes a content partner of Tumblr's. It's similar to the relationship it has with Twitter. Rob Bailey, who's the CEO of Data Sift, says, it was the Twitter deal, worked out really well, that led Marissa Mayer and team to say we should work with DataSift and Tumblr. He says, we will do this as a revenue share agreement with Tumblr. As a matter of fact, the great success of our Twitter deal has led to this deal with Tumblr. He said it was a mutual approach from both sides. So we've got Yahoo CEO Marissa Mayer and even Yahoo CFO Ken Goldman both going on the record as saying advertising on Tumblr is going to ramp up significantly next year in 2014. Nate, what do you think this looks like?
Oh, visually, this is fascinating because, I mean, DataSift, what it does with Twitter is so interesting because there's so much contextual information on Twitter. Ironically, Twitter is all about the words, right? So it's very easy to understand what a tweet is. Whereas Tumblr, all the times in recent weeks I've been on Tumblr, and maybe this is the same for you, Sarah, it's to look at cats, you know, and it's photographs.
Exactly. It's
and
animated GIFs. That's kind of...
Exactly, right? So I'm trying to work out sort of how it can do for Tumblr what it does for Twitter. And at the same time, I wonder what an ad on Tumblr looks like. I really am curious because on Twitter, it just looks like an ordinary tweet. So on Tumblr, excuse me, could it perhaps look like an ordinary post, but it's a sponsored post? That could lead to some really interesting creative ad campaigns or some really disastrous ones as well. So I'm really, I'm kind of curious how they're going to do this.
I do think that's an instructive parallel because Twitter uses this same company, DataSift, for its fire hose. And what Twitter has been lauded for in many corners is its ability to sell those ads using that highly targeted data that everybody wants without disrupting the user's feel for the usefulness of the service. People generally don't complain about Twitter advertising, maybe a little bit here and there, but they've done a good job, in my opinion. Can Tumblr do the same thing? Because you make a really great point, Nate. It's not the same kind of way of delivering content. Should they put banner ads out there? Is that going to satisfy advertisers? I mean, how do they do it? Sponsored posts, I think, would be very disruptive.
I think you've got to look at how BuzzFeed has done this because they've done it very well. I question a couple of things there, but really their business model has proved successful and they're growing very, very well. And I can only imagine that really what we're going to see on Tumblr is something akin perhaps to BuzzFeed, but maybe with not the same top-down sort of editorial control, but something that is managed in to appear in a similar fashion possibly.
Like a decentralized BuzzFeed. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of how if I had to put a wager down on how it's going to turn out, that is how I'd imagine, at least in the first instance, they'll experiment. And I think BuzzFeed has shown that there is a business model that can be generated off the back of a huge amount of UGC. So yeah, it'll be an interesting one, and obviously they've got to do something because Tumblr is, I don't know how valuable it is at this point.
Oh, if anybody can sell it, it's going to be DataSift. That seems like a no-brainer part of this, right? I mean, Yahoo did the right thing. They found the right people to figure out how to sell this. It's how they do it, how they sell it without, reducing that user base that Tumblr has.
Well, it's a two-part thing because DataSift isn't. I don't think DataSift sells the actual ads. They're not an ad sales team, are they? They kind of analyze the data so it can be sold.
Yeah,
they basically make it easy to buy, right?
Yeah, so it kind of needs a third party to come in and say, this is how we're going to do ads on Tumblr, and this is how it's going to work. I don't know. Maybe someone from BuzzFeed's looking down the barrel of a new job. I have no idea.
I think they're probably going to get a lot of great data on all of us and know that Nate and I really like looking at cats on Tumblr. So, serve up the right ads. But it's like, where do those ads go? That's what I want to know. I mean, they're probably going to end up between posts in our dashboards when you're opening up your Tumblr feed. It'll change things. It'll be interesting to see how many people that alienates, or if we all just get used to it because we are used to it on other networks that are somewhat similar to Tumblr.
Let's take a quick break. Thank one of our other sponsors for today's show, TechServe. You've heard us talk about it probably before. It's the premier authorized Apple reseller from New York. Serves creative professionals at all levels, assists in deploying Apple, Avid, Adobe solutions throughout the United States. And whether you're already committed to iPads or just getting started, from sales to support, process to practice, TechServe can help. If you want a great example of this, is the one we talk about all the time, and it's an excellent example. If you've been to the Delta terminal in LaGuardia Airport in New York or in Toronto or Minneapolis, you may have noticed that every seat in the terminal is equipped with an iPad. You may not believe that if you haven't been to these terminals, but we've got video in the video version to show it. Every seat has one of these iPads there, and you can sit and you can order food from it. You can check your email. Over 1.5 million visitors use these iPads in Delta's terminals. Now, OTG Management is the hospitality company behind the Delta terminals, but TechServe is who they asked to provide, configure, and install what turned out to be the world's largest deployment of iPads. And the number keeps growing as they roll this out to new terminals. TechServe is the natural place to turn for this. It may be the natural place to turn for your needs if you need to roll out a large number of Apple products, iPads. If your enterprise has a problem, help's just a phone call away. TechServe always provides ongoing support. Look, if you're considering adding iPads to your business, you should ensure the project's success. You want an experienced partner. Call up TechServe or visit their website. If your business is considering integrating iOS technology at your workplace, they can give you a complimentary iPad deployment assessment. Go to techserve.com/TNT. That's TEKSERVE.com/TNT. And TechServe will help you assess your current or future iPad needs and give you the advice to make it a success. That's techserve.com/TNT. And we thank TechServe for their support of Tech News Today. Box.com sort of taking aim at Google Docs and Office 365, especially because they got Steve Sinofsky, the guy who used to run Microsoft Office back at Microsoft, to become an advisor. And they also, a while back, hired Senior Vice President of Engineering Sam Shalace. He's the guy who created Writely. Writely was the company that Google bought and turned into the word processor in Google Docs. Shalace worked at Google for a long time, helping to develop Google Docs. Now they've got Box Notes. They unveiled it at BoxWorks in San Francisco. It's a limited rollout right now. You can sign up for notification with the beta. They expect wider release in 2014. But what it does is allow you to modify font type, size, format, bold, italics, that stuff, along with adjusting alignment and inserting bullet points and ordered lists. You cannot export the docs from Box at this point. You can't open other docs like Microsoft Office docs or vice versa. But they're trying to say, look, we've got a simple way for you to collaborate. And it's not about, constant collaboration. In fact, Steve Sinofsky told Wired, it's not about footnotes and an appendix and a table of contents and things like that. Those things aren't relevant because the document won't last that long. You'll just keep going. It's about fast collaboration. It's also only available on the desktop, although they do say in their promotion it will be available on mobile, maybe read-only at the beginning. Box obviously wants to do this because they want you to live in Box. They want you to use Box to store your files, and then they want you to be able to use those files within the Box universe, and therefore you stay a Box customer. Is this necessary, Nate? What do you think?
It was so funny. I really had to bite my tongue when you said ordered lists. I was like, ordered lists? Where's my investors check? As everything I've ever dreamed of. No, yeah. But it's a really interesting one because I think Box... It does very well from what I understand, but it's very business oriented. I think it has a lot of kind of corporate customers over sort of just consumers. And I kind of see this as being a first step into actually expanding out a suite of tools that appeal to businesses. I think that this is the first one. I can't honestly get excited by word processing. I think that Google Docs does it fine. I think that Microsoft does it fine. All these things don't really do anything interesting as far as I'm concerned. It's not a cool thing to be able to write a document in the cloud anymore. But I do think that this is sort of like the first step into something like it could be collaboration on all sorts of documents, but it could also be, screen sharing and, virtual meetings and conferences and stuff like that. And I kind of do wonder if they're testing the water as to whether this is something that businesses want to get in on and invest in with subscriptions, because it's certainly a very interesting way of differentiating themselves from the likes of Dropbox or SugarSync and similar people.
I've really never used any of Box's services. I've always thought of Box as, it's kind of like Dropbox, but a lot more for the enterprise, enterprise tools. And this seems like it just puts it on par with some other services that as an average consumer, maybe a smaller business, a lot of us are just more used to using. I mean, if it can compete with Google Docs and it has certain features that, you'd be familiar with from Evernote, and then maybe it has some features that Microsoft doesn't have in its suite of collaborative Office document software. It just opens it up to more customers.
I look at this and I think this is the clumsy, awkward first steps towards something I want, which is all of my documents securely encrypted, available, stored in the cloud, mirrored for offline use and editing in a powerful editor, right? Well, this isn't
Don't you have
powerful
that already with Google Docs? I mean, isn't that basically what Google does?
Sort of. What Google Docs does wrong is if I want to use Google Drive as my drive, some of the files are modified and I can't open them in other programs. And it kind of, I don't trust Google Drive as my storage solution. But yes, Google Docs, as far as the editing solution, is great. Dropbox is my favorite storage solution right now, although it has encryption problems, but it's easy. It works with my file system. It integrates seamlessly. They just don't have a way for me to edit things. I don't think I care. You know what? Honestly, the best one doing this is Microsoft. Office 365, I almost said 360. Office 365 and SkyDrive are the perfect combination of this right now.
Yeah, we use that at Wired. Office 365, Condé Nast uses it, and it really is a very, very good program. Suite of programs. And I do think that particularly with Sinosky behind this as well now, having Office 365 in its sites is no bad thing, and it's doing for the paid for corporate customers who need the support more than say Google has. What Google is to consumers. That was a garbled sentence, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally. Let's talk a little bit about that Netflix quote we heard in the news fuse. Kelly Merriman, content acquisition, said, "Hey, we saw that Prison Break was getting popular on the Netherlands-based piracy sites, so we acquired Prison Break for the Netherlands version of Netflix." Other quotes from this article at Torrent Freak or in Tweakers, Reed Hastings says, "Certainly there's some torrenting that goes on, and that's true around the world, but some of that just creates the demand. Netflix is so much easier than torrenting. You don't have to deal with files. You don't have to download them and move them around. You just click and watch." So on the one hand, Merriman's saying, we look to see what's popular. We could try to get the rights to that. And Reed Hastings is saying, we're winning against piracy because we're easier. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to store things. You don't have to move them around. You don't have to worry about downloading the torrents. Is he right? Have we arrived in that world where the video industry realizes they can beat piracy by just being easier?
Yeah, probably. I think so. And I think this is a really interesting one because it's not just happening with movies. I mean, as a side sort of tangent to this, Lady Gaga, which is the only time I've ever talked about Lady Gaga on a podcast, does something very similar. And they look at her and her manager. They look at how popular certain songs are or aren't in regions where they're doing tours. And they use Spotify streaming charts as a way to decide what goes in the set list. So really popular songs will go into the set list in that region. Songs that don't get streamed very much actually get kicked out of the set list. And they do that for every region that they travel to. And it's very similar to this in terms of it's actually looking at what people are actively asking for and consuming as a way to determine sort of what their next product is going to be or whatever. It's sort of data-driven culture at its finest.
Sarah, what do you think? I mean, I don't trust it. Maybe that's why I'm bringing this up as a topic for discussion. I don't trust that we've gotten to that point where maybe not all of the industry, but large players in the industry are like, yeah, piracy, that's a little thing on the side. We don't really have to worry about it. Yeah, it's against the law, and we should keep it against the law. But honestly, all it does is help us make a better product.
I mean, if I was stealing music or movies, I would probably say that I wasn't, but I really don't. So I'm actually, I am Reed Hastings' perfect customer because it's like, yeah, I don't know. I could go and get some show or movie that I really want that isn't available on Netflix, but it is a drag. I know it's wrong. It's difficult. I'd much rather pay my subscriptions and then I'm stuck with what Netflix is offering me. However, I was actually kind of bored last night. I couldn't watch Breaking Bad because I have an iTunes Pass and it wasn't available for me yet. So I'm like, I have to get off the internet and watch something. I haven't really clicked around in Netflix for a while and just seeing what's new. And there were a lot of kind of, I don't know, it seemed like pretty recently in theater movies where I'm like, oh, this is a good movie. Oh, this is a good movie. I always think of Netflix as like, not the best selection of movies. But I think that probably has a lot to do with the company saying what stuff is resonating with people and let's get it into our in our library, because then people like Sarah will end up thinking that Netflix isn't just a bunch of junky kids programs from Japan. Not that they're all junky, but there are a lot of them.
You should try using Netflix in the UK if you think it's bad in the US for a range of things to watch. Oh man. But I do think they must be doing this, Netflix, on their own side as well, looking at what people are streaming most and thinking, hey, could we commission a new series of that? You know, could we, if we've only got season 1 or season 2, can we buy in season 3 and 4 at a premium because most of our users are watching the first 2 seasons? So I guess it's probably something they're actually proactively doing quite a lot.
Yeah, they are. They're obviously looking at all data points. And I think that's one of the things that has made Netflix a success is they look at things that other people might overlook or dismiss. Like, you know what? We're going to look at those torrenting charts. Yeah, maybe they're embarrassing to the industry, but we don't care. That's valuable information that we need to incorporate into what we do. Also valuable information is what your students are saying on Twitter, apparently, according to a Glendale, California school.
Yeah, you're either going to say, well, this is going to keep the kids safer, or you're going to say, this is the, you know, this is just basically a surveillance state in the making. A school district,
Panopticon.
Yeah, down in Glendale, California, it's a suburb of Los Angeles, is paying a little over $40,000 to a firm to monitor and report on 14,000 middle school and high school students' posts on various social media accounts for a year. So that's Twitter and Facebook and that sort of stuff. Geo-listening is the name of the company. It's monitoring students that are age 13 and older. That's the age where parental permission isn't required for the school's contracted monitoring. So that's kind of interesting. So that's why it's, middle school. And sends a daily report to the principals across the district on which students' comments could be causes for concern. For example, there was and this comes from Chris Friedreich, who's the CEO of this firm. Geo-listening says, there was an incident last year where there was a student that was talking about ending his life, that sort of thing. And it ended up being something that the school felt was necessary to intervene. And he wasn't talking about it in the halls at school. It was on social media. So this is the sort of thing that you could say, well, it could prevent something really bad. The same thing as students being bullied online, or, maybe a picture of drug paraphernalia or a gun or all sorts of stuff where you think, well, it's probably better safe than sorry, in the school's interest. You probably have a lot of parents who say this seems like a really good idea, but at the same time, this is you could think of it as spying on kids. I mean, if a kid says something disparaging about a teacher, is that ever going to be used in a way that ends up making it problematic for that kid to be in the class? The company Geo-listening says, no, this is all about safety and making sure that kids are acting within the legal law and being safe. But it's hard to know if the school has all that information. Well, it changes things somewhat. Related to the story, Ars Technica has a story about a software called BlueJay, which is the law enforcement Twitter crime scanner. And this is not just being used on students, but it's being used in communities. It's providing real-time geofenced access to public tweets so that local police can keep tabs on people in their neighborhood. They can search hashtags like gunfire or protest, and it's a product of a larger company called Bright Planet. But it's sort of the same thing. It's like, well, you could say if somebody has a public Twitter account, then you have to assume that if law enforcement is using either their own tools or a tool like BlueJay, they're going to see it if they know what they're doing. Same thing as school. If you're really worried about saying something about your teacher or saying something that isn't cool at school, well, you need to know how to lock down your account more privately. Nate, do you think that it's really just a matter of, if you know your privacy settings, this isn't a big deal, or does this signify government getting a little too hands-on with this?
I think this is probably a result. I mean, this is probably something that was happening anyway. Schools were probably doing this in-house, if you like. I think that the news here is probably that they're starting now to take it so seriously that they're actually outsourcing it to other agencies. I don't think it's the stupidest idea in the world. I don't think it is I can certainly appreciate the privacy concerns, but I can see a lot of good that actually can come out of this, particularly as we move into a world where there is such a significant amount of cyberbullying and amount of stuff that takes place online. It does maybe allow you to sort of preempt troubles. When I first read this story, I sort of likened it a little tiny bit to how when I was back at school, we used to have to keep weekend diaries that we would write in class on a Monday morning. And I'm convinced that we wrote those as a way for teachers in the school to basically find out what was happening at home at the weekends and to see if there were any sort of causes for concern there. And I think this is perhaps a modern interpretation of that. I don't know. I think that the real challenge here is going to be what's done with the data, is where it's stored, how it's stored. Is it being passed and used against kids in future, perhaps, or whether it's just being passively monitoring for, illegal activity or really worrying activity. So I don't know. It's a difficult one to have a single opinion on, I think.
It's an interesting compare and contrast here. And I'm kind of going round and round with Robert in the chat room about this right now. He says these are apples and oranges, but they are the same thing, which is people are making public posts that anyone can see, and an organization is reviewing those to look for trouble. And we have very different reactions for the government using it for crime enforcement to look for, drug dealers and murderers and robbers than we do for kids. It seems creepy with kids. And I guess the way I was trying to think about it earlier today was, how would we feel about the police or the school police following kids around and eavesdropping on their public conversations? We would think that was creepy. Whereas if the police do that for a gang or for some kind of theft ring, we think that that's the police doing their job, right? As long as they're not violating privacy, as long as it's in public. It's a new way of being in public that we have to deal with. I don't think you should stop the school from doing it, but a couple of people in the chat room already said, well, this is going to teach kids how to be deceptive, how to create fake accounts.
For the first time ever, children will learn how to deceive adults.
Yeah,
it's an ever evolving communication gap, right? I mean, yeah, if kids think that the school is monitoring their public conversations on something like Facebook, well, they'll come up with other words to confuse the adults for a while, and then they'll catch on, and then they'll move on to something else. I mean, I guess you could argue, well, if you just communicate via Snapchat, then there's not much that the school or any government agency can really do. But
right.
But
or
yeah.
if you have a private Twitter feed
Exactly.
they can't see, or you make your Facebook account private, those are actually good things to learn about.
It's actually, I mean, one of the most interesting trends is so many, I call them kids, I mean, I'm pretty much just talking about anybody under 18, has private Instagram accounts. I mean, there are a lot of private Instagram accounts out there. It's very normal. Whereas before on Twitter, with a few exceptions, you kind of go like, ooh, private account. Wonder what they have to hide.
I think that what's also quite interesting is how much attention is going to be paid to context and time, because you could read a post out of context to perhaps posts made a few minutes or hours earlier, and think about GTA 5. You could be writing about, I've got this gun, I'm using these drugs, I'm killing this person, blah blah blah, and write a stream about that. But if you look maybe 3 hours earlier, they said, right, I've just got my GTA 5 disc, I'm going to put that in. Now, how much attention is paid to that sort of stuff? I do wonder, because without the context, the kids could appear to be doing stuff that's radically different to what they're actually doing.
All right, let's move on to the randomizer. Had 4 things up today. My favorite didn't do very well. Star Wars opening crawl in HTML and CSS only got 13% of the vote. I still think it's worth going and checking this out, looking it up. We'll have a link in the show notes to it. A guy redid the entire Star Wars opening crawl, that crawl that tells you the story of Princess Leia. Number 3 was a family in Guelph, Ontario, living like it's 1986. That got 22% of the vote. A Disney project turns the human body into a stealthy speaker. These are all pretty cool, actually. 26%. And the winner, the NSA director modeled its information war room after Star Trek's Enterprise. It was the Information Domination Center. I found the article on PBS.org. And apparently it was part of a profile done in Foreign Policy magazine of a guy, I'm trying to find his name now, Foreign Policy, or NSA Director Keith B. Alexander in Fort Belvoir. He created the Army's Intelligence and Security Command Center in the image of the Enterprise. And in fact, Glenn Greenwald of The Guardian, Glenn Greenwald of the Snowden leaks fame, has located photos he thinks are depicting that Information Domination Center on the website of an architectural firm in Virginia. Does look very space age.
Which Enterprise is it?
Well, it's the Enterprise NSA. It's a special version. of the enterprise.
No, I wondered from the when the different enterprises, there's like the next generation and then a different one, or was that?
Oh yeah, well, this is enterprise A, B, C, D, and E. I think this looks like it's most inspired by the D. Enterprise D. That would be the next generation one.
Interesting. Also just added on Netflix in the UK.
Yeah. But there you are, your U.S. tax dollars at work. Let's take a quick break and thank our other sponsor for today's show, Ring Central. When we built the studio, we chose to go cloud-based because it was easier to maintain, it was less expensive, and it was just a no-brainer. No PBX system to maintain. Our IT guy said you can get your voicemail and your email. You can send faxes through email. We love Ring Central. Zero startup cost, no PBX hardware, as I mentioned. Ring Central allows us to easily customize all of our call handling. You can offer the ability to send and receive faxes straight from your email, your PC, your smartphone, your tablet. New faxes arrive in your email inbox, so you can always stay on top of business. And you can preview and print faxes, design cover sheets, and even sign faxes electronically right from your computer. The signing always seems to be the hang-up for a lot of people. You'll never have to use the fax machine again, that bulky thing. You can just ignore it. Ring Central offers all-inclusive pricing as low as $20 a month per user, and you can start right now with a 30-day risk-free trial. And they have a special offer for our listeners. When you buy one desk phone, you get a second phone free up to 20 phones. So call this number designated for our listeners, 800-543-9980. That's 800-543-9980. Again, 800-543-9980. Or you can also go to ringcentral.com and use promo code TWIT. That's ringcentral.com, promo code TWIT. And we thank them for their support of Tech News Today. What's on the calendar, Sarah?
Tom, I'm glad you asked. Grand Theft Auto 5, as you mentioned, comes out tomorrow, the 17th. AT&T has started taking Galaxy Gear pre-orders on September 17th. Well, it will tomorrow. And the FCC is auctioning off 10 megahertz of spectrum starting January of next year, 2014.
Ooh, a new spectrum auction.
Yeah.
How exciting.
Haven't had one of those in a while. Those are fun.
Half a decade or so.
Yeah.
Let's see what's incoming.
Incoming message.
We got a voicemail from Allison on our conversation about naming our gadgets. She even clips a bit of the show out as an example.
Hey, TNT crew. Allison Sheridan of the NosillaCast podcast here. On episode 838 last Thursday, you discussed the excellent article on All Things D by Ina Fried about the sociologist Genevieve Bell, who says that our feelings for technology are growing stronger. You discussed this growing emotional bond to our devices, and John Brodkin said, I think it's crazy that people name their phones. Tom and Iyaz both confessed to naming their phones, while Sarah that she'd never named any of her phones, gadgets, or computers. But I want you to listen to exactly how she said that.
My phone is named Fred. And when I said it out, anyone else?
Mine was Barry Allen, named after the Flash.
I don't have a name for my phone or any gadget or
It's
any
just called
computer I've
iPhone.
ever known. I do name my cars.
So did you hear exactly how she said that? She said, any devices I've ever known. Yes, I think that proves that we're very emotionally attached to our devices.
Oh, Allison. Why'd you have to point that out? I thought I had gotten away with
You
that.
thought you got away with it?
I remember saying it too. I was like, whoops, ever known.
You kind of said knowned.
Yeah.
Like you tried to throw a D in at the end to cover it, too.
It's another one of my hybrid words. Owned
Yeah.
and known.
That's gotcha podcasting right there.
I know, right?
Oh,
Seriously,
Allison.
What up with that? No, I think it's a perfectly interesting slip where it's like, you're showing a little bit of that personal relationship there. I've known a lot of gadgets in my time.
I'm not saying I don't consider my iPhone my best friend.
Sure.
It just doesn't have a name
Yeah, it's your
beyond
name.
iPhone. It's like naming your cat. Okay, got an email from Tom. Not you, Tom. Different Tom. Says, hey, TNT. After listening to episode 839 from last Friday, I wanted to point out an article to clarify some details surrounding the sensor being used in Apple's Touch ID. Apparently, lifted fingerprints, like what happened to the German interior minister, and severed fingers won't work on this fingerprint sensor. He points to a quote, the sensor can detect the ridge and valley pattern of your fingerprint, not from the layer of dead skin on the outside of your finger, which a fake finger could easily replicate, but from the living layer of skin under the surface of your finger using an RF signal. That only works on a live finger, not one that's been severed from your body. Whew, thank goodness.
What a relief. Thank you, Tom.
I wasn't
Actually,
hungry anyway.
Several other people wrote in with the same reassurance that the
Several
severed-
hundred other people did?
I don't know if it was 100. I said several people I've known wrote in. That's it. And then Fez in Montreal said, instead of an adapter, I have a USB cable that is listed as charging only. It came with a Belkin USB wall adapter. It does not have the data cables and thus also is safe to use in the public locations described in your story. This is the USB condom story we had in the news fuse where it blocks your data port. So that's another option. One option would be to get the little thing that goes over the end, it blocks the data port, and you can use your current cable, or you can do what Fez did, and you can get just a charging only cable. That's another good one. Thanks, Fez.
Label that cable, by the way, because they look like all of your other USB cables. I don't know how many times I pulled one out to try and transfer data, and I spend 20 minutes trying to figure out why it's not working. It's like, oh, it's one of those.
Well, that brings us to a sad early. Well, it's not early. This is a good end. It's a good day to die. No, I don't know what I'm saying. Thank you, Nate Langston, for joining us. That's what I'm trying to say.
I haven't died. It's a brilliant end to the podcast. It's brilliant.
The best end ever. So what's going on, man?
Two things I'd like to point out. The first. We're still doing our Wired UK podcast, which I would love people to check out. We keep getting these brilliant reviews in national newspapers over here, so I feel like we're doing something right. If you search for Wired UK in your iTunes, your Downcast, your Instacast, whatever, we do that once a week. We did a great show that went up on Thursday. And funnily enough, you just mentioned Genevieve Bell. I met her this morning to do an interview about a whole bunch of mad stuff from IDF, about loving your devices, about powering laptop chips from wine. That's going to be out on the show on Thursday. So now is a great time to subscribe and find that. And also my brother Andy and I have just started doing a wholly new podcast, not about tech. It's called Do We Need This? And we question whether we need things in the world like cat cafes and passports and male nipples and stupid sayings and things like that. It's a bit fun. It's not necessarily suitable for all the kids because we do talk about some quirky stuff on there. And that's at bit.ly/do we need this. We haven't quite set up the website yet, but it's in all the podcast stores and directories if you take a look for that.
Thank you, Nate. A pleasure as always, my friend. Also, folks out there, don't forget about our subreddit, technewstoday.reddit.com, where you can submit stories. You can let us know what kind of stuff you would like us to talk about. In fact, Habituela Condolce, if I'm saying that right, submitted the story about the Glendale, California school that we talked about. So thanks for that. You can find us on the web at twit.tv/TNT. You can email us, tnt@twit.tv, and you can give us a call and leave us a voicemail, 260-TNT-SHOW. John P. from Geek Beat joins us tomorrow when I'll find out how to properly pronounce his last name. We'll see you then.
Good call.